Hello and welcome to this episode of Backyard Fitness and Stuff. I'm your host Wyatt, WN, YouTube rapper, YouTube actor, cosplay nerd, overall enthusiast, a lot of things. Hello, hope you're having a wonderful day. So I'm going to keep the InkTank rolling, if you will, and we're going to go back, we're going to watch part 1 because I enjoyed part 2 so much of our good pal Ryan giving all the Alien Force aliens ultimate forms. But I watched part 2 first, so now I'm going to watch part 1. So we're just going to do it in like Star Wars order. So, before we get into this reaction, I dropped a song now everywhere called 90s Static, and I would really appreciate it if a couple of you guys would go and listen to that. I cannot thank you enough. If you just give me a little bit of musical support, that would be amazing. And without further ado, let's get into this review. Reaction. 3, 2, 1. Aliens.
Good evening, Internet World and Universe. This is o.r.ash, and today we are going ultimate.
All right. Creating new ultimates.
For the longest time, I've seen people wanting us to do a video covering the ultimate aliens of the titular series, Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. It seems like in every series, Ben 10 tried to have some kind of gimmick that would result in a new power or transformation for Ben that overall would be pretty short-lived. The most popular of those were the Ultimates.
I can also evolve those creatures to their ultimate form.
Oh.
Ultimate aliens were the result of taking an alien's DNA and putting it through a simulated war zone for 1,000,000 years. The evolution that occurred would then become the new transformation, for better or worse. The Ultimates were
So that's why they were older.
Albedo
Also, I
and the
think I saw
Ultimatrix
Wild
in
Mutt.
Alien
That's
Force.
funny, going
then
back and
taken
watching.
by Ben, then yeeted away by Azimuth at the end of Ultimate Alien, and then returning later in Omniverse with Albedo again via bootleg DNA stabilizer, I guess. At one point, before the Ultimatrix was yeeted away, the Ultimate aliens inside of it gained sapience, because glitching. From looking at comments, I know these guys are the parts of the Ultimates you want us to cover. Where are they? What are they doing? Wouldn't Ultimate Big Chill technically be the real biological father of Ben's children? It's always bothered me that the Ultimate Evolution feature was introduced in Alien Force, but only half of the Alien Force playlist got Ultimates, and then Cannonball and Wild Mutt for whatever reason.
Ultimate swamp fire! Ultimate
I see your angle.
Ultimate Big Chill! Ultimate humongous orb! Ultimate Echo! Ultimate Cannonball! Ultimate...
No. You don't need to exist.
I'm so mad.
So, today I'm going to be making Ultimates for the rest of the Alien Force playlist, excluding Alien X. From what I've seen with designing Ultimates, there are 2 rules they indirectly use in the show that I will be using today. Number 1, the color palette has to change. None of the Ultimates share the same color palette as the original Alien it's based from. Number 2, there has to be a power trade-off. Essentially, they have to lose one of their old abilities to get a new one.
Makes sense.
Ultimate Humongosaur can't grow anymore, but now he can turn his hands into Gatling guns.
I mean,
Let's go ahead and get started.
that looked kind of cool though.
First up, we have Ultimate Goop. Now, the reason I'm starting with this one is because this is the weakest concept I feel that I came up with. In all honesty, it was kind of hard coming up with an ability set for an Ultimate Goop whenever the original is literally just a pile of goo. Really, I could have gave him any kind of strange ability like any of the other Ultimates, but I wanted it to make sense genetically. So instead, the thought process I went with for this one is actually more akin to like a D&D slime. So I messed around with some shapes. First, his color scheme wise, I wanted to make more of like teals and purples to make him seem like he's kind of toxic. If you touch him, it's gonna like seriously mess you up. As far as his abilities, I actually took inspiration from the classic horror movie The Blob and Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece.
Love it.
Enough.
Love
so
it.
essentially, his new abilities
What a
that
weird
he has
combo.
is that he can absorb things into his body and consume them. Essentially, if something goes into his body, it turns into the slime that makes up his body and increases his mass overall. He's just gonna keep getting bigger and turning into a more giant blobulous monster. The second ability I came up with for him is that he has essentially a low level of density shifting. Now, Now, with original Goop, he had to have a gravity projector because he himself couldn't support his own weight and couldn't keep himself together. With this guy, he is able to keep himself together. The trade-off being, though, is that he can no longer separate his body. If something is cut off of him or is taken off of him, it's off. He can't reattach it.
So he's eventually going to run out of Goop.
Viscous booger of an alien now, instead of slime that can spread everywhere. And with that ability, he now can control his own density to thicken himself up into a more solid state. Essentially, if he were to try to throw a punch at you with his regular goo arm, it would splat. He can now compact his slime, making him a lot more solid. So, something before that would have caused regular Goop to like explode and splatter everywhere, this Goop can just thicken his skin and not explode. Long story short of it, with Ultimate Goop,
like
he is much
aged
larger,
cheese.
much more viscous, he can't splatter or separate anymore, but he is a lot stronger. May I present Ultimate Goop.
Kind of like translucent.
Next up, we have Ultimate Jet Ray. Now, the original Jet Ray is already a little bit OP, seeing as he can fly light years in the span of seconds. So it was a little bit tough to actually think of a new ability set or something that would benefit the alien that can already fly across space. My main thought process with this Ultimate Jet Ray is that he's an amphibious species, and they typically live out in space a lot. I wonder if space would have the same type of effects as an open ocean environment and result in an evolutionary feature known as deep sea gigantism, where essentially, because the environment that they're in is so open and wide with nothing in it, they start to take up the space in which they live. So considering these guys can fly out into deep space, which I consider probably the most open anything can be, I imagine that Ultimate Jet Ray would get quite large, probably 10 to 20 times his original size. The second ability that I was thinking for him is that now, to go along with his Neuroblast, he now can create kind of a Neuroblast sail from his wings. When designing this guy, I gave him orange sections to his wings that are the same color and texture as his horns. I imagine now the Neuroblast would come from the horns instead of his eyes, just because it would look a little bit cooler and be different. Putting that same effect onto the wings as he's flying, he can now charge his flight with the same Neuroblast energy he's able to create. And I imagine with that, now he can go even faster, but so that there is a one-up as far as an evolutionary ultimate, because of this new Neuroblast sail thing that he can do with his wings, he can now actually travel through dimensions. The boost that he gets from these Neuro sails literally lets him be able to rip through space and create wormholes or just jump from place to place. Essentially, he's moving so fast, he's ripping through space and can get to anywhere he wants in a blink of an eye. The power set trade-off for this guy is that because he's out in space all the time, he doesn't really need legs or hands because he's just floating and flying around places all the time. So I took away pretty much all of his appendages, except for a little claw he has on the end of his tail. Essentially, Jet Ray, instead of being a super fast manta ray, he is now the most terrifying space whale in existence.
I was literally going to say space whale.
This is Ultimate Jet Ray.
But he looks like a flying fish.
Ultimate Jet Ray.
Sick.
Before we move on to the big
my
brain
favorite
boy
so
himself,
far.
Why not make your brain bigger with today's sponsor, Brilliant.
A lot of people often wonder how we keep our minds sharp when it comes to power scaling, determining how strong the powers of our aliens are, or even explaining to the internet why Ben 10 can defeat Goku and Superman. Well, that's where today's sponsor, Brilliant, comes in. Brilliant is a problem-solving website in
That's a tough argument, my
different
friend.
interactive courses in math, science, and computer science. One of my favorite things about Brilliant is that it takes you step by step when it comes to answering the question so that you can fully
Mostly because
understand
like the
and
defects
learn
with
at
Alien
your
X
own
and whatnot.
pace. There are multiple things to take into consideration when it comes to power scaling, but the one thing you can't run away from is mathematics. But with Brilliant, you don't have to run away, as they offer lessons in algebra, geometry, and everything else that you need for a refresh so that you can crunch those numbers. To keep your brain pumping and your mind fresh, be sure to check out brilliant.org/the InkTank, where you can sign up for free. And hey, the first 200 people to click on the link get a 20% discount off their annual
Said your brain is a TI-84 or whatever.
Brilliant.org/the InkTank.
Brainstorm.
Next up, we have Ultimate Brainstorm. Now,
Also,
Brainstorm
perfect
was the
transition.
first
Good
of this
segue.
set of aliens that I actually had a few different ideas on, so I'm actually doing two concepts, this being the first one I thought of. Essentially, with this Ultimate Brainstorm, I wanted to take his electricity powers and push them up even further. So now, instead of electricity, he has electromagnetics, which essentially he can still use electricity at small amounts, but his new base ability is the electromagnetics. Now, with this first Ultimate Brainstorm concept, the main thing that I wanted to do was take off his arms and legs. Now, hear me out.
I'm listening.
This is not meant to be a dark thing. His main body, where his brain and the little electromagnetic bits of his body are, and then his limbs are electromagnetically charged to stay within a vicinity of the main body. With this, he can detach limbs and like stretch them much further than he would initially. Instead of having an actual physical reach, he can just send his arm or his leg out. And with this, he's a lot more physical of an attacker because he no longer really has a lot of long-range attacks unless he sends a limb flying at someone. I kept thinking he could be using this to like spin around like a top or just this terrifying blade of limbs and stuff.
Pretty sure
and
I played
just
a boss
thought
in
it was
Crash
a really fun
Bandicoot like
visual,
that.
so I really wanted to use this idea. Another thing with this guy is that now his shell is now made of metal, and his head he can no longer open, it is just set open, but it has a small electromagnetic field that is encasing it. Other than that, this is my first concept for an Ultimate Brainstorm.
Ultimate Brainstorm.
Sick.
Now, onto the second Ultimate Brainstorm concept that I had.
'Cause of course,
I
multiples.
nicknamed the Crab Cannon. Now, with this guy, I wanted to essentially make him a lot more beefy than smart. The idea that I had with this guy is an idea that I've actually had with a lot of other aliens that use more like telepathic, electricity, abilities that are associated with the brain. I wanted them to like
Crab
have
Cannon.
brain-based abilities, but not intelligence. An example being that recently I did a Synaptech transformation for a Patreon commission called InkTank. He still has telepathy, but his species isn't super intelligent. Just because they inherently have the ability doesn't mean they have the intelligence to go along with it. Think of it in the sense of like, this guy has the superpower to fly, but he doesn't have durability or super strength, so whenever he lands, he just fucking breaks his legs. He can no longer open the shell on the top of his head. It's actually a lot more closed down on his brain, compressing the electricity and funneling it to these gigantic railgun claws that I've given him. I wanted this guy to just be a giant beefy crab monster with lightning cannons for hands. He still has his electricity powers, and they're even stronger now, but he is a lot more dumb. With some of the Ultimates in the original series, they liked incorporating like metal into their designs for some reason, so I thought, hey, why don't I do that with this Ultimate Brainstorm? His shell is made completely out of copper, which is super conductive. All in all, this concept is probably the closest I would associate to an actual Ultimate from the show style design, because it's just meant to be fun and strong and beefy and weird. There's not a lot of cleverness to the design, in all honesty, with this one. I just did this for fun. So may I present the second concept I have for an Ultimate Brainstorm.
Ultimate Brainstorm.
I think the giant space whale is still my favorite of this episode.
Next up, we are moving on to Ultimate Chromostone. Now, with Ultimate Chromostone, I actually had a couple ideas again. This first one I'm talking about is meant to be more of just a basic concept Ultimate, and with this, I actually did two renders of it. The different forms I am simply labeling as Chromostone Pink and Chromostone Red. The whole idea behind it is that with this Ultimate Chromostone, the DNA and power within the crystals of his body start overtaking the rest of his body and kind of breaking out of the rock shell that makes up the rest of his body. Because of this energy and Chromostone's ability to fly beforehand, this guy legitimately doesn't even need legs anymore, so I kind of took them away. And all of his energy abilities are juiced up like tenfold. But again, with this, these guys are the exact same concept. I just had two visual ideas for it. The pink one being more of like a floating fortress, so he was a lot more of like a scary looking crystal god. The second one, I wanted to just be a lot more spiky and cool looking. I gave him 2 eyes instead of the 1 because I couldn't figure out exactly where to put a single eye. Another ability I imagine these guys would have is actually a basic Petrosapien ability, which is crystal generation and crystal kinesis.
Okay.
Essentially, these guys can grow more crystals and fire them out and make shapes with them and stuff like that. I imagine that Petrosapiens,
cool.
because of their genetic
Looks
link,
like a
they would
needler.
have more abilities akin to each other with this ultimate, which I'll actually be talking more about with the next Ultimate Chromostone idea.
Or is that the other
the
concept?
2 designs that came out of this, even though they're for the same idea. So, but for now, here are Ultimate Chromostone Red and Pink.
Okay. There it is. Yeah.
Ultimate Chromostone.
Heck yeah.
Another concept I had for an Ultimate Chromostone, which this is my favorite concept that I came up with, is actually meant to be more of akin to a fusion with him and Diamond Head. Chromostone and Diamond Head are genetically linked, considering that Chromostone is the artificial crystal Jesus of Petropia. So of course they're going to have some kind of genetic
I love the little
similarities.
descriptive
The
doodles
idea
on the
for this
sides
Ultimate
that kinda,
actually
like,
stems
help you understand
in a
the thought
little
process.
theory I have on if you were to do a Ultimate Diamond Head, it would just be Chromostone. That's a whole argument and theory that I have for another day, but it's the base idea behind this guy right here. Visually, I wanted him to have the same kind of look as Ultimate Alien Force Diamond Head with the rock base and then the crystal bits everywhere else, because I loved that look for Diamond Head. So essentially, I just kind of took that design and Chromostone's design and shoved them together. This guy is uberly strong. This guy is twice as big and can now create crystal constructs. The way he uses these crystal constructs is that he can shoot them out wherever and cover a surface in the material of crystal and then channel energy to it. Kind of working like a crystal lightning rod in a sense. I imagine this could be used for a number of really cool combo attacks, and visually I was just really happy to work on this guy. I did the gradients of the purple into the teal and then all the rainbow bits for the energy half of his body. I honestly just had a lot of fun designing this guy. This is how I imagine an Ultimate Chromostone would be. Here is my second concept for an Ultimate Chromostone.
The color work on this one is insane.
Ultimate Chromostone.
And that was the rest of the Alien Force playlist. Finally, we have designs for the rest of the Alien Force playlist Ultimates. At least designed by me. But before we end the video, we do have one more Ultimate I have to design. Or rather, redesign. Now, it's no surprise that not every OG Ultimate design is loved. So, we had our patrons vote for one of the existing Ultimates for me to take a crack at redesigning. And that alien is Ultimate Cannonball.
Cannonball!
Now, with this Ultimate Cannonball redesign, I'm gonna be 100% honest, I was drawing blanks. After like a week of trying to think of a cool power or add-on that wasn't just giving Cannonball a gun, I couldn't come up with ideas, and I honestly felt kind of bad for the people who had to design the original Ultimate Cannonball and for people not really liking him. It is kind of hard to come up with ideas for him. He's already a pretty solid alien. We want to make him much tougher, much buffer, and much scarier. I gave him this giant massive tail. I actually based his design off of a pangolin. They're these little armored guys that can roll up into a little ball, and they're really cool. I like them a lot. So I wanted to give Cannonball that same type of profile, where he's got this hunched back, he's leaning forward, he's got the smaller legs, and this massive tail. The main use of this tail being for attacking. I imagine he can do gigantic tail whips and slams with this thing in his regular form. When he is in his ball form, he has 2 stages to his ball form. He can go into his regular ball form, which includes just the shell pieces going to his mid-back, and then have the tail hang off. Again, using it for like attacks and to like grab onto things, to swing himself or create momentum. He would just become a gigantic wrecking ball. One problem I did think of with this excess tail was, wouldn't it always be hanging off, and wouldn't that make it a lot harder for him to roll around? So he can also wrap the tail the rest of the way around him, creating a whole nother set of armor to defend himself. The spikes on the end of his tail act kind of like a tread, making it to where he can roll around on whatever terrain and just tear through shit. And of course, it being an Ultimate and me wanting to make it more scary, he is much larger than the original Cannonball. Other than that, may I present the redesigned Ultimate Cannonball.
Ultimate Cannonball.
Thank you guys so much for
Nice.
watching. This was a bit of a different type of video, so I hope you enjoyed.
Loved
Designing
it.
these ultimates was super fun. If you have any suggestions of
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think my favorite, still from the beginning, was the space whale. I feel as though it being able to like rip holes and being the size that it was, I just felt like that was super cool. All of them were great. What was your favorite? Did you like that or this or any of this? Leave a like. If you dislike that or this or any of this, or if you hate me, be sure to leave a dislike. I plan on reacting to more InkTank because, you know, that is comments that I see react to more InkTank, so I'm trying to do so. So if there's another video in particular, I kind of was looking at the Doctor Who one, and then also why Alien X was a massive disappointment. So I'll probably put up a poll and see which one of those you guys would rather me react to. But without further ado, that's been this review. All right, guys, I'll check you later. Yeah, backyard fitness and stuff. Woo! Come solve mysteries, yeah. Now I'm sitting in the room staring at